This project will focus on the Republic of Turkey and how nationalist attitudes have changed from the times of Ataturk to the rule of the current party, the AKP. It will also examine how national identity has played a role in one of Turkey's most relevant debates, the EU application process.
The military leader who won his country's freedom, then built and ruled a modern Turkey, is dead. Elected to succeed him is General İsmet İnönü, the former premier. Under Ataturk's 15-year rule, Constantinople was renamed Istanbul and became a westernized city of modern, well-planned buildings. He banned harems, gave Turkish women suffrage at the polls, and equal educational opportunities under foreign teachers. Impatient with former methods, Ataturk banished ancient ways, substituting machinery in an oriental land. Under his one-party government, factories increased as he industrialized Turkey. The social revolution he accomplished was widespread. For the first time, girls mingled with boys in the schools, reading a Latin alphabet instead of the unwieldy Arabic. At home with his adopted daughter, the man who ruled with a fist often ruthlessly clenched was kind and gentle. In every way, he emphasized the change from the old Turkey to the new. And when he decreed that
Ataturk, formerly known as Mustafa Kemal, was the man who established the Turkish Republic in 1923 and is largely accredited for the success of its modernization. At the time of independence, Turkey sought to break away from the practices of the Ottoman Empire, which they viewed as backwards, and create a state based on the Western European model. The video showed some examples of Turkey's westernization efforts, including a focus on industrialization, equality, and the Latin language over Arabic. The nationalist reform program known as Kemalism rested on 6 pillars: republicanism, populism, statism, reformism, and most importantly, secularism and nationalism. Kemalism saw religion as an obstacle to modernity, and thus took many actions that removed the influence of Islam, the dominant religion, from the public and political life. Kemalists hoped that nationalism would fill the void left by religion and become the primary ideology. This graph from 2011 shows that secularism still plays a large role in Turkey's government. In comparison with other countries, Turkey exercises stricter control over religion, sometimes at the expense of individual liberties, in order to maintain a modern secularist core. However, the role of religion and national identity is changing with the AKP, the Justice and Development Party, in power.
Turkey's ruling Justice and Development Party, the AKP, secured a majority in the country's snap election on Sunday. With nearly all the votes counted, Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu's party won about 50% of the vote and secured about 325 of the 550 seats in Parliament. The surprise result means the AKP has passed the 276 seats needed to form a single-party administration, and thus enable President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's allies to reclaim a one-party rule. The AKP fell short of the 330 National Assembly seats needed to put President Erdogan's long-held goal for constitutional changes to expand the presidency's power to a referendum. In stark contrast with June's elections, all opposition parties saw their support decline. Support for the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, or HDP, dropped to just over the 10% threshold required to enter Parliament, according to initial figures. In June, they secured 13%. The main opposition Republican People's Party, or CHP, saw their support drop to 24% from 25% in June, while the right-wing Nationalist Movement Party, or MHP, seemed to be the biggest loser, with its votes falling to 11.7% from 16.3% in the last round. In Diyarbakir, Kurdish activists clashed with police outside the headquarters of the HDP.
Having had their power re-legitimized last month, the AKP is changing the Turkish narrative. The old Kemalists are now viewed as elitist and authoritarian, while the AKP claims to champion the democratic Muslim voice. Though secularism is still a major tenet of the government, the AKP is striving to make Turkey a leading Muslim democracy in the Islamic world. This graph provides some explanation for the prevalence of Islam in Turkey. 99.8% of the population is Muslim, and of those, the majority are Sunnis. Ever since its creation, Turkey has had tenuous relationships with minority groups. Turkish nationalists during the founding of the republic discriminated against Christians and at times forced them to relocate. Turkey's relationship with the Kurdish minority has deteriorated in recent years, due in part to a breakdown of a ceasefire in 2004 with the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party. This table reveals that the perceived role of Islam in political life has been on the rise, from 45% in 2002, when the AKP took power, to 69% in 2010. A number of factors can account for this phenomenon, some of which include the strength of the pro-Islamic AKP, a rise in Euroscepticism and anti-Western sentiment that unites Turkish Islamic communities, and growing feelings of supranational identities, such as pan-Islamism or pan-Turkism with other Turkish republics, including Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. The renewed popularity of the AKP and a growing sense of national unity under Islam have had significant implications for one of Turkey's major current events, the EU accession process. In the 1990s, Turkey made EU membership a part of its national agenda by redesigning the education curriculum and prioritizing EU standards. Many minority groups, specifically the Kurds, used this time to try to gain a larger voice in the Turkish narrative. However, growing nationalism has led to a decline in support for EU membership in the recent years.
The publication of the European Commission's annual report on Turkey coincided with the day on which the founder of the modern republic, Kemal Ataturk, was honoured. In the 1920s, Ataturk launched a wave of reform in many areas, seeking to create a nation in the image of European democracies. Last year, President Erdogan's speech put Turkish pride into clear terms. He said Turkey is now a powerful country. Turkey is no longer a country that would beg at your door. Turkey can stand alone. And with its determination, Turkey would join the EU if it were accepted. If it were not, it would make its own road.
Anti-Americanism, the growth in Turkish nationalist parties, the perceived threat of Kurdish nationalism, and relative economic stability have all contributed to a sense of Turkish pride and nationalism that make EU membership less appealing. Furthermore, many sources point out that Turks don't see themselves as European, but rather as a part of a pan-Islamic supranational family. However, in recent months, the tone towards EU membership has become more favorable as Turkey seeks support to deal with the recent refugee crisis.
A crisis that EU leaders have been unable to solve alone. The UN expects more than 1 million refugees to arrive in Europe by the end of the year. So governments are looking to Turkey, which shares borders with Syria and Iraq. Ankara is now asking that its long-standing EU membership application be sped up.
Today, we have re-energized our accession process. We have agreed to have an integrated strategy against all instabilities in the neighborhood of Europe, and also to work together shoulder to shoulder regarding the refugee crisis.
Turkey will get some €3 billion to help refugees in return for stemming the flow of migrants. There is a need for checks on people who pass through Turkish territory. We know there are foreign fighters who have that intention and who use this route. Secondly, there are also terrorists who could infiltrate. We've seen that with the attacks in Paris. So it's very important that we have this cooperation between Europe and Turkey.
Compris dans les attentats de Paris. Donc à partir de là, il est très important qu'il puisse y avoir cette coopération entre l'Europe et la Turquie.
When asked how European and Muslim values would be reconciled should Turkey join the EU, about 2/3 of EU member states were unsure or skeptical. Turks, on the other hand, were largely optimistic. As discussions about membership continue, the conflict between a pan-Islamic identity and a European identity will surely come into play.